The crocodilians that live with us today. The crocs, gators, caimans, and gharials are relative newcomers. They diverged from their relatives during the Late Cretaceous. That's right, crocs really aren't the living fossils you were led to believe. Before them, however, were millions of species of crocodilian-like, non-crocodilian reptiles as part of the giant group Neosuchia, which all convergently evolved crocodilian-like body plans. In fact, the crocodilian body plan has cropped up many times throughout evolutionary history. Another of these has come from the croc-choked rock units of the Brazilian Bauru Basin, so let's check it out. The Late Cretaceous saw a huge region of what is now Brazil lay down a bunch of sediment, capturing all the kooky creatures that lived and died there like a huge crinkled lithified sandwich. This region is unique in the world for containing a collection of the most diverse crocodiliforms in one place at one time. This region is called the Bauru Subbasin. A good chunk of the rock units here are collectively called the Bauru Group. It contains a huge number of geologic formations including the Araçatuba, Armantina, Uberaba, Marília, Vale do Rio do Peixe, Cambambe, São José do Rio Preto, and Presidente Prudente formations. The extreme diversity often discussed whenever this Valley of the Crocs is brought up is actually technically stretched out over these various geologic formations, which means that not every single critter from the Bauru Basin was alive at the same time. That being said, even with this caveat, the place is still just absolutely loaded with crocs. Three of the most well-studied formations, the Adamantina, Marília, and Serra del Galga formations, had a combined total of over 20 crocs, with many yet to be described, and many more waiting to be discovered, and this was 87 to 66 million years ago. All the way back in 2011, Edvaldo Fabiano dos Santos and Lercio Fernando Doro were collecting fossils and outcrops of the Adamantina Formation revealed in a road cut made by roadway construction in the municipality of Cantanduva. Among many fossils they found was the skull of a croc-like reptile, which they eventually donated to the Museu de Paleontologia Professor Antonio Celso de Arruda Campos, along with many of the other fossils they found at the locality. Once the croc-like skull they had found had been prepared at the museum, it had been preliminarily identified as belonging to a bizarre lineage of non-crocodilian crocs called Pyrosauridae. It wasn't until mid-2024 that this skull specimen was fully described and named in The Anatomical Record article by a huge team of Brazilian, American, and German paleontologists led by Juan de Ruiz. As I mentioned earlier, this specimen, most of the back and top of the skull, a chunk of the back of the snout, and a chunk of the jaw, plus a rib fragment, all come from the Adamantina Formation, making it 83 to 66 million years old. The holotype, specimen MPMA 68001/11, contained enough traits that the authors found to be unique to this specimen for them to give it a new name, Epoidesuchus tavarese. The genus name means enchanted crocodile, using the ancient Greek root epoide for enchantment because the city closest to where it was found is known as the Magic Spell City. And of course, suchus just means croc. The species name, on the other hand, is in honor of Sandra Simeonato Tavares, who is an instrumental paleontologist and director for the museum the specimen is housed in. Unfortunately for the ones out there that complain about fragmentary fossils, the Epoidesuchus holotype doesn't really preserve enough about it to know exactly what its body looked like outside of inferences that can be made based on what is preserved in the skull and with comparisons to its closest relatives. But before I get to what type of croc Epoidesuchus is and what it may have looked like, why don't I bring in
Mr. Man from Animal Planet the Most Extreme,
so that you can get a visual representation of about what size this thing may have been. Since the lower jaw fragment found with the skull was 50% larger than the same bone in any of the other closely related crocodiliforms in the Adamantina Formation, Epoidesuchus would have possibly been quite large. Some have estimated it as around 4 meters 13 feet in length. That's around the same size as many large members of the true crocodilia with us today. Thanks, Mr. Man. With size out of the way, what the hell kind of critter was Epoidesuchus? The author team turned the anatomical traits of the skull into data that they could place within a phylogenetic software, along with trait data of all sorts of other crocs from across the croc tree. Since they already had an idea what group it may have belonged to, with the tentative identification of Pyrosaurid, they had some idea of what the digital analysis may find. The team's work found that Epoidesuchus was a pyrosaurid closely related to Ruckwasuchus and Barairosuchus, all of which belonged to the Sebechia, Sebasuchia, and Notosuchia, a branch of the crocodile tree far removed from the only living group, the Neosuchia. The Notosuchians are known from mostly terrestrial forms, but many of them return to the water, evolving semi-aquatic crocodilian bodies millions of years before the true crocodilians even existed. And don't even get me started on Metataranthids. Before the publication of Epoidesuchus, some researchers found enough evidence to split the Pyrosauridae into two subgroups, the Epoidesuchinae and the Pyrosaurinae. The authors of the new paper found that Epoidesuchus further added proof of this division, as it was a shallow, pointy, long-snouted form of Epoidesuchine. Compare it to the taller, more domed skulls of the Pyrosaurinae. All of this tends to suggest that the Epoidesuchinae were far more amphibious than their Pyrosaurine cousins. To this end, the authors infer that Epoidesuchus may have been somewhat similar to modern-day crocs in general build, albeit with the possibility for longer legs that were kept more underneath the body than to the side, features ancestral to the Notosuchia. Epoidesuchines, like Epoidesuchus, differed from modern crocs by having eye sockets that were directed more to the sides, while modern crocs have more telescopically placed eyes. This might also lend some evidence to the idea of these animals being a lot more semi-aquatic than most of the Notosuchia, but still more dependent on land than modern crocs. Nowhere was safe from some type of croc-like reptile. These Notosuchians were present on land and in the water. Coming from the Adamantina Formation, Epoidesuchus had to contend with the most croc-line reptiles of any of the Bauru rock units. Adamantinosuchus, Epoidesuchus, Armadillosuchus, Barairosuchus, Baurusuchus, Brasiliasaurus, Caipirasuchus, Campinasuchus, Carianosuchus, Roxochompsa, Mariliasuchus, Montiltosuchus, Morinosuchus, Sphagisaurus, and Stratiosuchus, plus the only currently known member of the Neosuchian lineage from this chunk of time, Titanochampsa. Aside from this comedic cacophony of cantankerous crocs, Epoidesuchus also lived with the sauropod dinosaurs Adamantinosaurus, Arrudatitan, Antarctosaurus, Bracillotitan, Gondwanatitan, and Maxicalisaurus, plus a bunch of indeterminate abelisaurs, unenlagians, and enantiornithine theropods. Snakes, frogs, turtles, mammals, and fish are among the known fossil critters of the underbrush, but of course the region was full of all the same types with us today. There was not a more happening place for these reptiles. Brazil's Bauru Basin truly was a bastion of big, beautiful, burly beasts with big teeth. For more interesting stories about nature, the history of life, or what goes bump in the night, subscribe, like this video, drop a comment in the comment section below, and hit the bell icon to stay in the know with everything Edge. Thanks for watching.